Hello. This week was the JPIT conference, and there's a lot about it on Twitter and across social media. And so today, in this politics in the Pulpit podcast, I, Jenny Mills, as Secretary for Education and Learning in the United Reformed Church, and a great supporter and encourager of all the work of JPIT, will be looking at the texts for this week, but also bringing into it some of the things that we listened to and discovered and heard in the conference. I would like to particularly use this pertinent comment from Simon Hughes about how does your faith shape your politics, and the encouragement to look at connecting local communities to policy discussions. If you go onto social media, you'll see so many things from the weekend that are really inspiring and enabling and encourage us to think and to act. Each week, I'm joined by a guest from a different place and space in the pulpit and political landscape. And today, I'm very pleased to be able to introduce Daleen Ten Cate. She is originally from South Africa and an Afrikaaner. Daleen moved to the UK 22 years ago, learning English at a local village school. Daleen studied at the Luther King Centre and trained at the Northern College for ordained ministry in the United Reformed Church. Daleen is based just outside Blackburn and works as a missional discipleship mentor with 34 churches across Lancashire and a green apostle across the synod. So it was with great joy that I introduce Daleen. Hello.
Hello, Jenny, and thank you for the invitation. It is really a pleasure to be with you today.
It's a joy to have you, and I'm sure we're going to have a really interesting conversation. So thanks for joining us. Politics in the pulpit. I wonder if you could just reflect for a bit what that might mean to you, whether you see yourself as a pulpit politician, how that ties in with your role as a missional discipleship mentor, but any particular projects you have that you're working on and with that would connect your faith and your politics.
I would say, first of all, I didn't really know that I was, a minister that preached politics in the pulpit. But I think growing up in South Africa, one thing for sure, growing up in the apartheid regime, I was always aware of the unjust systems and unjust structures, and I was always part of changing those. And I think for me, it wasn't really something that I thought I'm doing. It was just part of my DNA.
Yes.
And it was only when I came over to Britain that I was kind of seen as a very political person, and also people see me as liberal, which I didn't know what to understand, what it means. I just thought I'm following in Jesus's footsteps, and I think for me, Jesus was never the mild and weak Jesus. Jesus was always the one who campaign for the marginalized and campaign for the people who haven't got a voice. And that's just what I'm trying to follow. So I don't know, that's just my definition, but it is probably politics.
Yeah, that's really interesting in the idea that it's kind of was just inherently part of who you are. And that's then, I assume, particularly with the role you're in, but some of the things that you're doing, that has led you to also speak out for those on the edges and those marginalized. Can you share a little glimpse into that for us?
Yeah, I think, again, I always thought, when people say they're very spiritual, I thought, well, I didn't see myself as spiritual because I was a bit like the Sound of Music of Maria. She just wants to escape the chapel and go in the mountains and do stuff. So, and it was only at Northern College that I realized my spirituality is activism. So very much faith in action. And I think the role, I think when I kind of had the calling of God, I always thought, well, I think God made a mistake because I couldn't see myself in just a normal ministry role. But then with this role, I think it's it's just I felt so called to it because it is all these faith in action things that I involved in. So I enable churches, empower them, equip them, encourage them, all these kind of things to set up dementia cafes, refugee drop-in centers, food banks, eco gardens, and very practical ways of living out your faith. So I think that this role just suits me. God must have known that I wasn't just going to be a normal minister.
Well, I mean, I think many of us would agree with you that idea of normal minister. I'm not sure there is such a thing, but it really is important about finding your role and how your gifts and skills can be used. So from your context, what do you hear as the key justice issues or political issues that are around at the moment in the work in the area where you live?
So I'm definitely very involved with refugee work. Always been. I think I've been involved 10 years now. And where we live in the North West, we always, because property is cheaper, and we were always involved in refugees because we received a lot of refugees in our area, especially in Blackburn, but the whole of North West really. So I'm also the co-founder of Kairos Housing, that we as an ecumenical group of churches set up for destitute refugees during COVID. Just identified the need that there was no place to signpost any refugees that were homeless. The challenges, I would say, at this stage for me, specifically with refugee work, is probably the free tier system of refugees. I mean, it's very difficult to navigate because it almost created another racism system, because how different refugees are treated differently. From the Syrian refugees, Afghanistan refugees, now the Ukrainian refugees, where some refugees are allowed to work, some can work straight away, others can't. Others been here for many, many years, still haven't got their refugee status, and some other refugees can just walk in and get refugee status. So it's very, very difficult to navigate these different tiers.
And so something in that about the inequality of the systems and something about the processes that just that there doesn't, it's a maze to be able to even navigate some of those things.
Yeah, it's definitely unjust, and there's no equality in the system now. I think it was almost easier about 5 years ago when everyone was treated the same. But now it's very, very difficult.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that, and thank you for giving us a glimpse into what you do. Each week, my JPIT colleagues give a little roundup of their expertise, and a few things that are going on in the world at the moment. Quite pertinently, the 20th to the 26th of June is Refugee Week, and I think it's important we all look out for information on this and ways to support those who are seeking asylum in our country. We have going on currently the situation with the deportation or potential deportation of asylum seekers to Rwanda. And we think not only of the process itself and the cost and so many other unjust, it appears, things going on. We think of those supporting the men who are under threat of deportation and the mental health of these men, as many of them are being taken away from families and friends and relatives. We also continue to think about the cost of living crisis and the increasing concerns around fuel prices, food costs, wages, childcare costs, and bills, which is adding to the anxiety of more and more people. And particularly in the last couple of weeks, the government actions that appear to not be promoting the agreed climate care changes. So We hear of the promotion of fossil fuels in a way that we were hoping there would have been a pullback, the lack of investment in green energy, and more recently, the move away from the focus of rewilding our countryside. And in the church life, we're in Pentecost, and we celebrated Trinity Sunday. But this time, now we're back in the second Sunday after Pentecost. For many, that would be called ordinary time, but I'm not sure there's anything ordinary about the time we're living at the moment. So with our newspapers and the political landscape in our hands and in our hearts, and then with the Bible in our other hand, let us jump into the texts. So over to you, and I'm just wondering where you'd like to begin us on the passages this week.
So, yeah, I'm so excited about all the passages. I'm just going to kind of briefly start, I think, with the demon-possessed man in Luke.
Okay.
I think it works well for me, especially with Refugee Week starting on Sunday. And about structures. We said, about unjust structures. We talked about apartheid, which I was very part of, but also the unjust structures that we talked about now. And I think it's important to sometimes see some of the readings a bit like symbolical. We all know legion was the Latin term for division of the Roman soldiers. And the legion was the stern face of the conqueror. And the very famous and feared 10th Legion was often symbolized as a pig mascot.
Yeah.
So this is really a political cartoon. And it's interesting how the legion begged Jesus eagerly not to order them into an abyss. And then Jesus... and legion said begged Jesus to send them in a band of pigs, which will also kind of symbolize the military recruits. And I think it's kind of sarcasm what Jesus used, and he sent them into the pigs, and then the pigs, Jesus dismissed it, and then the pigs ran into the water. And I think it symbolized something about Pharaoh's army that ended up swallowed by the waters.
Okay.
And for me, that brings a lot of hope. Thinking that, structures like even apartheid was swallowed up. I'm not saying racism is gone, but there is that hope, that possibility that some of the structures can be swallowed up and can be destroyed. If we think about the Berlin Wall, that was destroyed. I mean, huge things that happened in my generation that I was part of that we thought would never, ever happen. So for me, it gives a lot of hope.
And that when I was in Palestine in 2019, when I went on, we were in Bethlehem and Jerusalem. One of the hopes of some of the Palestinians we met was that there had been the change in the situation in South Africa, that there had been the change in the situation in Ireland, and that gave the Palestinian Christians a hope. And I hadn't connected it to this text. So that is I love that connection, swallowing it up and something better coming out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would recommend for people who want to learn a bit more about this to read the new book of Reverend Dr. Graham Adams. It's coming out in August, and it's called Holy Anarchy. And I'm looking forward to read the whole book. I just had a little chapter, a preview, and in chapter 3, he writes a whole chapter about structures of dominion and the untamed God. And where he say about my name is Legion, and then he unpacked it a bit. And he said the central focus of Christian faith is the dethroning of power structures which impede the flourishing and life in all its abundance. Not just formal structures like political and economic systems, but patterns of social relationship, habits and norms. And not only structures which seem to be external to us, but structures within us, ideologies, mindsets and values. And
Wow.
I think, he really unpacks it, and I would really recommend people to read it. He based it on the work of Chet Myers, Binding the Strong Man, which I would also recommend. But just a few things that maybe will help you with this theme.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And we see in this text the kind of the power of Jesus. We've had the calming of the storm, haven't we? We've had, and then we go on to this freeing the occupying, freeing the man of the occupying powers and the whole structures. Do you have anything else you want to offer us from this text, or do you want to?
Yeah, I also, with another lens, I think it's important to maybe to stand still with Legion, and I built on this with James Allison was a Catholic priest, and he came up with this for the first time. And I think it's very important, specifically looking at Refugee Week coming up.
Yeah.
And he say it's not that important about the illness of the man or whatever we call it, but the role he plays in the community. And the role Legion actually plays in the community, he becomes the scapegoat. And as we know in ancient Near East scriptures, the scapegoat is actually literally the goat that take on the sin of the people. And then the goat is sent into the desert, and then that is the atonement of the people. And I think we have to ask ourselves, who are the scapegoats in our communities?
Yeah.
And I think refugees, through the media, because they labeled as illegal immigrants, is often the scapegoats. And they, the people who a lot of people say, oh, they just come and take our work, they illegal, they almost treat it as the others.
Yes.
So we can't cope with our things in our life, so we will just scapegoat them because they are the problem. And I think in this reading, Legion is the scapegoat, but then Legion was asked to live with the community. And I think now, with the Ukrainian situation and all that, we can learn from that scapegoat. And I think we have to ask ourselves, who are the scapegoats in our community? Who are the marginalized people that we blame? And it's not just refugees, it's people with mental health, people, LGBTQ people. Often these people become the scapegoats of our community.
Yes.
And I think it's important that we live with those people and learn from them. So, because I think truly working with these people, I truly think they change us. We can learn so much from them. And this, the theme for Refugee Week is healing. And I think when we become really welcoming churches and welcoming communities, and not just welcoming, but show hospitality and meet them where they are, they are going to change us. And we might heal them, but we will receive the healing.
Do you know, that's I mean, I love that, because I think often churches historically have seen themselves as those going out to help those poor people out there. And I think now more and more it's about that mutuality. We are changed by our encounters with others. So we might initially set out to help them, but ultimately they help challenge us in ways that we could never have imagined. And the power balance is much more about coming alongside each other and working together, isn't it? Rather than this giving out and being these great providers. I think it's interesting when you talk about the kind of blaming the other. We see so much of that in the political discourse, don't we? If a political party will blame the other or blame the lawyers at the moment. I mean, there's a really big thing about blaming lawyers who are doing their jobs, isn't there? Or we blame teachers, or we blame nurses. And that whole sense of blaming the other rather than embracing the other is something that is constantly bombarding us, really, through the media, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's just so that we don't have to take responsibility.
Yeah.
We don't take ownership, because if you blame, it's just so much easier.
So true, so true. And yet at the end, the man, as you say, lives with them and is that new disciple. None of the others kind of want to listen, do they? He goes to a Gentile country and yet none of them want to listen. But this man listens. And for me, there's something here about, it's not always about numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. One at a time. Yeah. One at a time. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Where would you like us to go?
I think I would like to go to Elijah while we're on the topic of, speaking out and justice and kind of activists and faith in action. I have to say, I think often we think to be an activist or to campaign or, speak out. We have to be like maybe prophets, be very bold and, I think often people think activists are the people who stay with their placards and throw themselves in the road and, cause destruction and things like that. And I'm really here reflecting on the bit that say, and Elijah thought God was in the wind, the powerful wind, and then he thought God was in the earthquake, and then he thought God was in the fire, but at the end God was just in a whisper or a gentle whisper. And I have to say, 20 years ago, I would probably say that I was that kind of activist that would jump on my soapbox and be loud and speak out and all that. And I still have that in me. But walking alongside other activists really changed my view about it. Because I think often people think, well, I'm not an activist, so I can't make a difference. And for me, it started really with the Quakers. And I did, alongside them, I did No Faith in Fracking, when fracking was still a big thing, especially in the North West. And just sitting with them silently in a vigil, or just walking around the place where the fracking took place, was just a different way of campaigning, doing it prayerfully, do it silently, but it just changed my whole view about activism. And then I also thought about Banksy, where I mean he speaks out so much with just one picture. And I think about that, where they say a picture can say 1,000 words. And I work alongside Reverend Jeffrey Hayes. He's a Methodist minister, and he's an artist, and he does loads of cartoons. That again, it just changed my whole view about, what does it mean to be a prophet, or what does it mean to be an activist in this day and age. And then also the Craftanon, where people that is just artistic, how they campaign with Craftanon, with maybe prayer flags and things like that. So really what I want to say is the Holy Spirit working different ways. So we don't all have to be bold and, kind of martyrs to become prophets. We can be, whatever God gave you is enough. It is.
that's really helpful, because I sometimes think, I was just looking this weekend about some of the action that was being planned in relation to the deportation of refugees, and I was thinking, oh, I can't go there and I can't do that, and I often think I should be doing stuff and I should be active, and then I carry a guilt, which obviously is completely destructive and it doesn't help anybody. And then you go, well, what can I do? And I think that's really helpful, this sense that there's this spectrum of activism, that it isn't just about being that loud voice or the placard or the physical presence in the space that's shouting out, but giving so many, kind of hearing the different ways in which God calls us to speak out, or to be that difference.
Yeah.
That's really
And
helpful.
I think it's very authentic,
Yeah.
just to be your authentic self that
Yeah.
God made you, and God gave you those gifts. And just talking about activism, where did I've lost my thoughts now. Thinking on to so many things. Anyway, I will get back to it, but I just thought it's important to say that. And these days, Christian Aid and JPIT and groups like that makes it so easy to campaign. They basically write the letter for you. You just have to kind of sign your name. So
Yes.
they do all the hard work for you, because I always feel like I can't express myself well in writing or in formal writing, but they basically write the letter for you. So you just need to engage and send it to your MP, and that is all we need. Every letter, we talked about, it's not about numbers. Every single one, if you just do one act, it does make a difference.
Can we just kind of lead back to that a bit with Elijah? If you always are that verbal activist, at some point you're going to get to a point where you have nothing left. I mean, you've got the whole Elijah, I'm kind of done here.
Yeah.
These big shows of something, and demonstrations of God's power, and then he's just like, and suddenly it seems like he's almost disconnected from God, but he's done, isn't he? And I wonder how you view that, with all that's gone on in the world in the last couple of years, and all that's going on at the moment, and the kind of the sadness many of us carry with us about the state of the world.
Yeah, it's definitely true, especially in the work with refugees. You definitely get vicarious trauma, secondary trauma.
Yeah.
So you have to be brave enough to say, I have to step away for a bit.
Okay.
The way I do it is probably, I'm lucky I can kind of just then go and work in the eco gardens with the refugees, and that restore my soul again.
Yeah.
Or I can just normally when things get tough for me, I just do something practical that doesn't take a lot of brain power, and normally it will be something in nature. That is where I restore my soul. But I think for every person it's different. But I think it's important to know when you have compassion fatigue, and where you just need to step away, and not feeling that you can't do that, because Jesus went on the sea with a boat when he had enough, or he would just go up and pray. For every person it's different, but I go for walks in nature. I work in the eco gardens, and I just go to bare basics.
And it's something about, sometimes we have this very, we almost have we talk about a Protestant work ethic, don't we? We kind of sometimes think we shouldn't give ourselves space, and we shouldn't allow ourselves rest. But our faith is about abundant living for all, isn't it? I mean, if we went on to the Galatians reading, the idea of, it's about abundant life for all, is what God wills for the whole of humanity, isn't it? Do we want to have just a couple of minutes looking at Galatians?
Yeah, with Galatians, I think it's just that whole thing about, nobody is now outside the structures of God. You're not female or male or slave, or you are just a child of God. You are included in God's family. And I think that whole thing about belonging and equality and flourishing of life and all that is just another sign of hope and another sign of abundance, the abundance that Jesus meant us to have in life, that flourishing life.
It feels like when Paul was writing to the Galatians, they kind of got fixated on one way of being church and being the community of, the community of followers of the way, and it was about just following the law and then everything will come, rather than living a life that flourishes and adhering to the law, but actually using that to benefit others and work alongside each other. And I think one of the things in the conference was about, not always seeing everybody as a potential person to come to church, and that loving everybody. And it feels to me like that this ties in so much with your work that you do.
Yeah, definitely. I can't I never see things like secular and sacred. For me, God is omnipresent. And if we say God is omnipresent, God is in the community, and it's just about, missio Dei, see where God is already at work and join in. So for me, there's no sacred, secular. It's just God is there.
Yeah, and then it goes back to, and then when you do those sort of things, then there you see God, there you see the face of Christ in the other, but equally you flourish too because of those relationships which build up and benefit you.
Oh, definitely. I always think about Hebrews 13 verses 2, where I know it's not the reading, but I'm using it quite a lot in Refugee Week, where it says, when I welcome the strangers, I host angels. And I can honestly say I've hosted so many angels in my life, and it just enriched my life so much.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. What an absolutely perfect way to end. And I would imagine to some of the people that you encounter, they would say that in you, they have encountered an angel, because that sense of somebody loving you and caring for you when you feel lost and destitute must be incredibly powerful. So, Daleen, thank you ever so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed this journey through the text today.
Thank you.
It's an interesting. Simon Woodman at the conference at the weekend talked about the church as an outpost on earth, called to make a difference. And I think you've just really summed that up in the conversations we've had today. So I'd like to thank you for coming, and I'd like to thank everybody else for joining us to ask whether or how we do preach politics in the pulpit this week. And if you have enjoyed this episode of Politics in the Pulpit, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast, and share this episode with your friends. We know that our listeners are a passionate and knowledgeable crowd, and we'd love to build a community of mutual learning and encouragement around the podcast. So what we'd really appreciate is for you to go to social media and join in the conversation. The best place is on Twitter at pulpit_politics. or using the hashtag Politics in the Pulpit, or on the Facebook community through the Joint Public Issues Team Facebook page. Each week we ask a question emanating from this week. I'm going to use the question and the sub-question that came up at the conference. And we'd really love to know your comments on Twitter or on Facebook. So what does it mean to build change from the ground up? We've definitely heard of some of those examples today, but the focus of the conference was that. And then where's the hope in our neighbourhoods? It will be really good to hear, as we have today, some of the experiences of where we have seen hope in our neighbourhoods, and who is part of that bringing of hope. So let us go into both our politics and our pulpits with a blessing. May we be anointed with God's Spirit as we bring good news to the poor, as we proclaim release to the captives, and as we help people and ourselves to see the world truthfully, and as we let the oppressed go free In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. Take care, and lovely to see you. Bye.